keeping safe and well. My name is Slava Gromluk. I'm one of PI directors. PI is a Public Administration International, is a London-based international consultancy and training organization. We specialize in strengthening governance worldwide. Our webinar today is a short overview of mediation, when and how to use it to address conflicts at work and the benefits that mediation can bring to your organization. I'm delighted that our mediation and negotiation expert, Anne Hall, is here to talk to you today. Anne is the workshop director for our annual international workshop called Negotiation and Mediation Skills. Once she has finished her presentation, Anne will be happy to respond to your questions. My colleague Amanda will now explain how to register questions and generally how the webinar software works. Amanda, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Slava. So a warm welcome to everyone. On the left-hand side of your screen, you will see a questions box, a poll box, a chat box, and a handouts box. If you have any questions for Anne throughout the webinar, please put your questions into the question box, and we will do a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We will be launching polls throughout the webinar as well, so we do ask that you participate. The chat box is open for everyone, so please talk amongst yourselves. Myself and my colleagues will be there as well. The handouts box at the end of the webinar, you will receive a copy of the slides and some marketing materials from us. And just to let everyone know, we are recording this session as well, so a recording will be made available for everyone at the end. Anne, I'll hand back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Amanda. That's great. So, as you know, we are here today looking at Introduction to Workplace Mediation. I'm going to spend probably about 45 minutes talking about this, and then 15 minutes for questions. If you have got any, feel free to put those into the chat room, and we may pick some of those up as we go through the next 45 minutes. So I wanted to just emphasise, because I looked on the list of attendees, and it did look like we've got quite a lot of legal experts joining us today. This is an introduction to workplace mediation, and I want to emphasise the point that it's undertaken in the workplace. So it's not a legal process, okay? So if you're expecting this to be all about the legal aspect of workplace mediation, sadly, that's not what we're going to be covering. This is an introduction to workplace mediation. If you have an interest in workplace mediation, then this session is for you. So this is just to give you an introduction and also to get you to understand what workplace mediation is. So what we're going to cover today is what exactly workplace mediation is, some of the benefits of workplace mediation. It's really taken off here in the UK, and we'll look very briefly at the role of the mediator as well. I'm also going to get you to consider when to use mediation. So it's not something that should be considered lightly, but it has its place to be used. So we'll look at when it's appropriate to use. I'm going to also explore with you one model of mediation. So this is just really to introduce you. And as Slava said at the beginning, this is a 1-week program that's running potentially via Zoom on the 23rd to the 27th. So if you are interested in this subject and you want to find out more, then we will be focusing throughout a 5-day period on all aspects of workplace mediation. So this is just really to give you a flavour, and if you're interested and you're just, finding out what this is all about. So the world of work, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you, we've got potentially many countries here today, but the world of work has really, really changed. At the moment, I can only speak about what's going on in the UK. So in the UK, we've gone through, as I'm sure many of you have, a variety of lockdowns and other terminology such as tiers. Some people have been working in isolation and they've been working from home. I think in the UK, we went originally from 4% or 5% of our population working from home to, at one point, 65% of people were actually working from home. Some people have just started to return to the workplace in the UK, so we're tentatively sort of branching back into the world of work. For some people, they will have continued to work in their workplace because of the nature of the work that they do. So for some people, it will be maybe slightly different in the way that they work. For example, use of PPE, face masks, social distancing, etc. But in the UK, on the 19th of July, they're calling it, I'm not sure how appropriate this is, but Freedom Day, when we are potentially not going to be undertaking social distancing, or it's not mandatory for us to undertake social distancing, and the use of masks will be optional, although I think yesterday they announced that you will have to wear them on public transport for the tube, etc. So we're tentatively starting to go back to the world of work, and it's an opportunity, and I think this is one of the biggest things about working from home. It's an opportunity to be back with our team. Having to work through Zoom or Teams has been, you know, the way that we've had to work. But I think for many people, they've missed being with individuals actually in the office or in the workplace. And I think that's been one of the drawbacks to having to work from home. Although for some people, they probably loved it, and other people have found it particularly difficult. But as we go back into the world of work, no matter which country you're in, there is the possibility of potential conflict in the workplace. So rather than being reactive, it would be good for us to be proactive. And so this is just an opportunity for us to think about mediation in the world of work and how we can look to resolve conflict. Okay, if we look at what conflict is, it's an open clash between two or more individuals. It's a serious disagreement or an argument. Now, saying that, some conflict can be very healthy. We can have some very good discussions and debates, and we can put our ideas forward, and we can listen to other people's points of view and their thinking, etc. And that can be really healthy. And at times we can agree to disagree. And I think some conflict in teams can be very advantageous. However, what we're talking about here is the other side of that, where conflict is an open clash between two or more individuals. And maybe it's built up over time. Maybe it started off as something quite small, and then it's continued to evolve and be unresolved. So the causes of conflict, some of the reasons that people are in conflict, it can be because of a breach of faith or trust. And if we look at trust, and which I have to say in mediation terms is quite critical, but anybody at work, working in a team, having trust with your colleagues is quite critical. And by trust, we mean a firm belief in someone or something, okay? So it could be there's a breach of faith or trust. So maybe somebody's been told something, asked or said they wouldn't say anything, and then unfortunately they've gone on and told somebody else, and that trust has been broken. It can be where there's unresolved disagreements. So something that started out really quite insignificantly has actually evolved into something that has, you know, exploded into unresolved disagreements. So it started off and it's just escalated. Can also be a difference in values and beliefs. That could be a possibility. One of the biggest areas, I think, is unacceptable behaviour. And many of the mediation cases I've done in the workplace have been around bullying behaviour. So where one individual has been bullied by another individual or more than one. So unacceptable behaviour in the workplace as well can be a cause of conflict. So what behaviour do we see? Well, unfortunately, see many people react in many different ways. So some people can get very angry, some people can shout. You might get people getting very upset at work, going off and crying and becoming very withdrawn. We can get some people who are very resentful about the conflict that's maybe within the team or within those individuals. Some people will actually physically become ill and then will unfortunately look to go off sick or will have to go off sick. So many of the behaviours that we see are, as you can see, quite negative, and this can have quite a impact on the team and those individuals in those conflicts. So one of the things we need to think about is ways to resolve conflict. So as I said, this is conflict in the workplace. Now, ideally, what we'd like to do is get the staff to try and resolve this first. So we are all adults, and it would be great if those staff involved in the conflict could try and resolve this first. Okay, and sometimes when it's just occurred, that's possible. But as this sometimes goes on for a number of weeks, months, can be years, it's very difficult for some people to get this resolved. What we'd be looking at then would be getting the manager to try and assist in resolving this with the staff. So the manager to step in, to be observant, to look at, you know, how the team's working, to pick up that maybe something's not quite right, having those discussions with their one-to-ones with their staff, and picking up that, you know, there is conflict within the team. And ideally, we'd be trying to encourage the manager to try and assist with this in order to get this resolved. Now, for some managers, this is extremely difficult. And many of the cases I've seen, many of the managers have not been able to either assist with resolving the conflict, they don't feel confident, or they don't feel they have the tools to do this. Okay, so what they tend to do is they'll go to HR, and they'll look to HR to either advise or assist with this. And maybe they're a new manager, maybe they're not confident, maybe they don't like dealing with the negative side of management. So the next step would be for HR to advise and assist with this, and maybe also to step in. Maybe they might talk to the managers, they may also speak to those members of staff as well. Negotiation is an option, mediation is an option, the grievance procedure is an option, and depending on what the issue or the conflict is about, it may possibly be that it is a disciplinary process, and that would be for HR to actually investigate. The challenge we've got with this list, if you look at it, is that as we go down the list, there are more people involved, much more time, and the cost actually increases as we look at that particular list. And I'm just going to go back. So if we can get people at the top end of the list, so getting the staff or the manager to resolve this, this would be ideal because it's quite quick, it's quite speedy, there's not many people involved, and there's really relevantly hardly any cost involved in this. As we go down the list, you will see that there are more people that need to be involved. There's more time that needs to be invested. If anybody here has undertaken a grievance procedure, then you will know that it's very time consuming. There has to be a panel, there has to be investigations, there has to be a process that you have to adhere to within your organisation to actually undertake a grievance. And this can take a considerable amount of time. The other side of that is that it's also very stressful, both for the individuals in conflict, but also for those people as well trying to manage these processes. So if you have been involved in a grievance, maybe you're on an HR basis, then these can be quite stressful as well. So as we go down that list, more cost, more people, longer time, and potentially, not always resolved in the way that, an individual would like it to be resolved. So what we're trying to do is trying to get people, obviously, to nip this in the bud. So as it occurs, actually deal with it. But that isn't always possible. We mentioned negotiation. So let's just look at that. Negotiation is the business method that's used to resolve disputes. It's a dialogue intended to resolve disputes, and it's people talking directly to each other. So there are no third parties involved. And again, if we were looking at the programme on the 23rd to the 27th, we would be spending a considerable amount of time looking at negotiation skills and processes, etc. So that's one option, okay? If we look at mediation, and if we've got, and I think we have got quite a few sort of legal professionals who are joining us, this is not underpinned by law, okay? So mediation, this comes from the Law Society Code of Practice in the UK, is a voluntary process in which two or more parties who are in dispute agree to the appointment of a neutral third party. Now, the key to this is voluntary. So people have to want to do this. The disputants or the parties have to want to actually undertake mediation. So one of the things we need to check very carefully is that these individuals do want to do mediation, okay? So I would be always asking throughout questions such as, can I just check, do you still want to continue with mediation? And the answer I'm looking for is a yes or a no. If it's yes, then the mediation can continue. If I get a no, then that means that the mediation actually concludes. That's the end of that process, okay? And as a mediator, one of the things I need to make very sure of is that people want to do this, okay? So I have to be constantly checking with all parties that they are willing to actually do this. Mediation is where a third party, that could be the mediator or mediators, okay? You can actually mediate on your own. I've done that before. So I've just been one mediator working with disputants or parties. Or you can work in a pair, and I've also done that as well. So there's been two mediators. And again, this depends on the conflict and the issues, and it's up to the mediator to determine whether to work as a sole mediator or whether to work in a pair. Okay, but the mediator helps two or more people in dispute attempt to reach an agreement. And I think the key thing here with mediation is that any agreement comes from those in dispute, not from the mediator. So it's not my role to suggest or coerce or manipulate people to come up with an agreement. It's purely my role to make sure that I'm in charge of the process, not the outcome. So the agreement comes from those people in dispute, okay? And I think that's quite critical, because for many people, if you're not clear of what mediation in the workplace is, it may be that you think, oh, well, it's up to the mediator to actually, tell them what to do. And that's not the case with mediation. So I'm in control of the process, but I'm not in control of the outcome. So some of the agreements can be very simple things like, I want an apology, and I want the other party to speak to me only in a professional capacity during the working day. And that would be what everybody would agree to. And that would be documented, and the agreement would only be sent through to those people in dispute, not to anybody else. The other thing about mediation, there's a lot of trust within the mediation process. So HR have to trust that the mediator is going to undertake this in a professional and ethical way. Those in dispute have to see the mediator as a credible mediator, and that they're going to trust them to take them through this process in order to reach an agreement. So there's a lot of trust within the mediation process. Okay, so I think those two paragraphs there are quite key to actually the area of mediation. So I've got a poll for you. So hopefully you're all still with me and not eating your lunch or having a cup of tea at the moment. So what I'd like you to do, I've got two questions for you. First question is, would your organisation require workplace mediators in the future? So yes, no, or don't know. Question two is, does your organisation employ workplace mediators currently? Yes, no, or don't know. So I'm going to pose that poll to you. Amanda explained how to do the poll. I think the poll is open at the moment, is it not, Amanda?
Yes, both polls are open.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're going to give you, how much time for this, Amanda? How much time have they got to do this poll?
A couple of more minutes, maybe, about a minute, 2 minutes more.
Okay, so we're going to give you 2 minutes to answer both those questions. So thinking about, does your organisation actually require workplace mediators in the future? Is this something you think you might want to actually undertake and have either some in-house mediators or look to find some external mediators? I notice we've got potentially somebody who is a regional mediation coordinator. I think that's Deborah, actually. So your organisation requiring all workplace mediators, is that something you're thinking about doing? And does your organisation actually employ workplace mediators currently? So it'd be interesting to see what the results are of this. You've got about another minute before we'll close the poll, and then we will look at the results of that. I think the thing about mediation, I think one of the things that particularly I'm interested in, I have a real passion for workplace mediation, is it's something you have to want to do. So I've delivered workplace mediation both in the UK as a training course and also overseas. I actually delivered this in St. Lucia. And the thing about doing this, undertaking workplace mediation, is it's something you really want to do, that you have an interest in. I don't have obviously a legal background. My background is in HR and learning and development. And I was asked many years ago actually to undertake a mediation in the workplace, and that's how I got into it. So I've just found it so interesting and very rewarding. So Amanda, we should have just closed the polls. Is that correct?
Yes, the polls are now closed, so
Wonderful.
I will just show the results.
Okay, be interesting to see what everybody thinks. I can't wait.
Okay, so
Look.
the results for question 1, we have 59% say yes.
Wow.
14% say no.
Okay.
And 28% don't know.
Okay. That's interesting.
Let's do poll question 2.
Yeah.
We have 25% to say yes.
Okay.
63% no.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
13% don't know.
Okay. Interesting. I'm quite surprised with regard to people thinking about this in the future, which is quite encouraging, because I think, you know, if you are a large organisation or a small organisation, the fact that you are proactive, so prepared for, you know, and able to deal with conflict, I think is quite reassuring, rather than waiting until, you know, these things occur and then trying to sort of do something. So I think that's quite encouraging, actually. That's really good. Okay, well done, everybody. Thank you for participating in that. Quite an interesting sort of scenario. Let's just look at when to use mediation. So obviously, if the staff cannot resolve these issues and the manager has tried to resolve, this would be the ideal scenario. And HR has endeavoured to try and resolve it, both with the manager and or the staff, by giving them guidance and assistance. Generally speaking, what happens is that the individual or the manager usually goes to HR with their particular issue or conflict that they're currently having, and they are, generally speaking, at the end of their tether. They don't know what else to do. So maybe they've tried all sorts of things in the workplace, in their team, and now they're just sort of generally at the end of their tether. So they'll have contacted HR, and HR probably is more than aware that there's been particular issues, or maybe you know, they're just flagging these up now. Maybe they have tried negotiation, but it hasn't resulted in a satisfactory outcome, or possibly that they're not skilled enough in negotiation to actually get the required outcome. So this is where mediation may be the next step, and it would be for HR to talk to individuals to outline what mediation is within their organisation. And if it's that you've got internal mediators or you're using external mediators, then this is when maybe the HR team would contact the actual mediator. Okay, so mediation would be the next step. Generally speaking, what I find is I get a little summary from the HR contact, literally a paragraph or two, just giving me a summary. And actually, that's all I need. Sometimes they'll say to me, "Oh, do you want all the emails and everything?" And actually, no, I don't, because what I need to do is actually speak to the people in conflict, okay, and actually get their side. So if we look at mediation, the role of the mediator is that you need to be impartial. So you need to have the ability to see both and all sides. So we have to be very open-minded. So when we're gathering information as a mediator, we have to make sure that we ask all the pertinent questions that will gather that information. Okay, so just because one person tells us one thing, we can't assume with disputant 2, 3, party 2, 3, that actually that's the case. So we need to be very careful in how we actually gather the information. We need to make sure that we're asking everyone the same sorts of questions to elicit the information. So we do need to be impartial, and we do need to be able to see all sides. We do need to be neutral. So I started mediation when I worked within the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. We had about 3,000 staff. And I can honestly say that all of the people that I worked with in mediation, I've been an in-house mediator and I've also been an external mediator. I never ever knew them. Okay, I wasn't connected to either the issues or the individuals. So you cannot have a conflict of interest. And if you are an in-house mediator, one of the things that you might find, even though there's 3,000 people working in the organisation, you do have to, at the end of the mediation, agree about how, if you were to meet again in the future inside the organisation. And what I used to say at the end of each mediation case was, I will obviously greet you in an appropriate way. If we see each other on the corridor, I won't look to ignore you, but we will not have a discussion about anything to do with the mediation outside of the actual meeting that we're having currently. So I'll acknowledge them. I'll obviously say good afternoon, but I would not be having a discussion with them about anything to do with their mediation case in the future. So you do need to be neutral. Now, the next one's interesting. So independent. So you'll see here it says not connected to the organisation. Now, interestingly, you can be an internal mediator, although you are connected to the organisation, but you are working in a professional and ethical way. And it's for the disputants to perceive you as being independent. So this is about your credibility. So you can be an internal mediator and you can use external mediators, and it's down to the individuals that you're working with for them to perceive you as being independent. So you can be both. So the role of the mediator, it is quite a skill. I have to say, majority of people don't actually want to be with you, if I'm being honest. They don't want to be in mediation, really. They want this to have been resolved. So they are quite emotional. People can be, these things can have been going on for quite a long time. So they're not always keen to see you, I think it's fair to say. So you do need to be very skilled in how you manage this, whether it be face-to-face or, as we are at the moment, most work is being undertaken over Zoom or virtually. So you need to have a good understanding of the process. And again, if you were to join our programme on the 23rd of August, you will go through the whole process. You'll go through what skills you need. You'll also need to be very credible. So although this is outside the law, it's not anything to do with the legal sort of sense of mediation in the world of the legal professionals. You do need to be very credible, okay, and you do need to be very organised. If you're doing face-to-face mediation, then it's much more intense because you do need to have a room for party 1 to come into, a room for party 2 to come into at a different time. You need to be briefing your receptionist. I never say I'm doing mediation. I just say I've got a confidential meeting that I'm undertaking today, and Mr. Smith will be coming in at 1:15. Mr. Jones will be coming in at 1:30, and Mr. Fred will be coming in at 1:45. So I'm staggering the times, because what I don't want is for them to meet outside and for there to be additional conflict. So I want this to be very controlled. Same with Zoom. If you're doing it over Zoom, then you'd be inviting people in at different times to make sure that, you know, they're not all meeting at one go. So your approach needs to be very organised. Same for letting people go at the end of any mediation case. You always make sure that you take disputant 1 out first, and they've got somewhere to go, and you would escort them to the room that they're going to be in, just allowing them to sort of recover and recuperate a little bit, maybe have a cup of tea. Same with disputant number 2, make sure they go out slightly later than the other one, and that there's no chance that anybody can actually meet up afterwards, because it can, for many people, be very traumatic. For many people, it'll be a relief that this is actually completed. You do need to be very credible, so you have to come over as being very professional and organised. The other thing you need to think about, all of these disputes are very different. I don't think I've seen one that's the same as any other one. They're all quite unique. And so for each case, you need to think about the approach that you're going to take with each of these mediation cases. So you do need to think about that. There's also an issue with regard to any note taking. So one of the things the mediator needs to make sure is that they are able to destroy any particular notes that you keep, and you have to give assurance to those individuals. Not always the case that you can, you know, march over to a shredder. They're going to have to trust you, and again we're back to trust. They're going to have to trust you that you will destroy any notes that you've made during that mediation case. So there's quite a lot of skills to actually undertaking mediation in the workplace, and again this would be something we would explore in great detail in order to enable you to do this confidently, and we would actually be practicing some of these things to ensure that, you know, you've got the skills before you up and go. So very skillful. I think one of the biggest things though about mediation is you do have to want to do this. It's no good saying, well, we're going to put the whole of the HR team on, you know, mediation course. Not everybody will want to do this. There will be many people that are not particularly keen in undertaking this type of work, and that's absolutely fine. There's no problem with that whatsoever. But I think, you know, if you do have an interest, doesn't matter whether you have no background in sort of HR or learning and development, but if you have a genuine interest and you feel this is something that you know might have the skills to actually do, and you're keen to try it, then I'd say, you know, give it a go. The only reason I got into it was because there were 2 individuals within the organisation. HR didn't know what to do with them. I think they put one person on garden leave and then decided, like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? And I got approached and said, and was asked if I could actually try and sort out, i.e. their definition of mediation, to get them to find some solution in order to get these 2 people back to work. And I think I started off with, if I'm being honest, because I was untrained, Anne Hall's mediation model, which seemed to work very well. I was quite impressed that it seemed to resolve the conflict. However, so I've worked as an untrained mediator, and obviously I'm qualified through the Law Society and the Open Network as a workplace mediator. If I have a choice, I'll be quite honest, Anne Hall's mediation model was okay, but the training that I received and the information and the sort of skills that I acquired on the training, actually, if I'm being honest, probably was much better. Okay, and I seem to become more confident when I did some training on this. So, role of the mediator, very skilled, very credible. You have to be very credible. In terms of a sort of approach, it's sort of informal, but it's not that informal. So, because I have to be impartial, neutral, and independent, I'm very careful about my behaviour when I'm with people. Okay, so you know, I'm not particularly over friendly because that's not the situation that we're in. So I can see there's quite a few things on chat. Amanda, is there anything that you think might be relevant to pick up on at this point?
At the minute, no.
Okay.
So you're fine to carry on, Anne.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that. So let's have a look at a mediation model. So as a mediator, as I said, you would generally be contacted by the HR department or an individual within that department. So it could be that there is somebody specially designated that deals with conflicts or looks to sort of assist with those particular issues. And as I said, I would actually be getting potentially a summary of what the conflict is. And, you know, I don't want all the emails and folders and all those sorts of things, because what I'm really interested in as a mediator is I need to contact party or disputant one. Okay, so HR probably have informed them that mediation is an option. They will have agreed to that. And as a result, I will look to contact party or disputant one. Disputant one is always the one that comes to HR first. So whoever contacts HR first is generally disputant number one. So I would look to contact them initially either by phone or by Zoom. I'd be keen to find out if they are willing to undertake mediation. So I'd be giving them an introduction. I'd be giving them some background about me as a mediator, and that's to build credibility and also to try and build trust with that individual. Now, face-to-face, obviously, is preferable, if I'm being honest. However, Zoom is, you know, where we're at the moment. So I'd be trying to sort of build trust with that disputant. I'd be giving them sort of some background of how long I'd been a mediator, which is more than I'd like to admit to, but it's probably over 10 years. It's also about giving them sort of some confidence in my ability to actually undertake this journey with them. So I'd contact them, I'd get an overview, give them an overview of what mediation is, check that they still want to carry on doing this. So can I just check, having just told you what mediation is this something that you want to continue with? And I'm deliberately using closed questions there, because what I need to get from that individual is a yes or a no answer. Okay, so if they're in agreement, what I would be then asking them to do is give me an overview of what the issue is. So what actually is the conflict? So allowing them to tell me in their own words what the conflict is. That's why I'm not too keen to read through all the emails or the summary, you know, files or whatever, because I need it to come from them. I need to understand what their conflict is. Once I've gathered all of the information, as I said, I may well be making notes as we're going along, and I'll be telling them that that note taking is part of the process. But I'd also be ensuring that they are aware that any notes I make will be destroyed at the end of this particular process. So I'd spend some time with disputant number one or party number one, and I'd find out their side of the story. Okay. Now I'd do the same, exactly the same process with party or disputant number two. Okay, so I'd be explaining what mediation is. I'd be assuring them that this is confidential. And again, you almost have to have like a script. So I have key areas that I would address. And again, we'd cover this on the programme. So you would have obviously a little script that you would work on. because we're all individuals, we all have our own different ways of speaking and our different styles. So you develop your own little introduction to mediation that feels comfortable to you. And initially, you might start off with a little script, or a little agenda, just to remind you of areas to cover. But as you become more confident doing it, then you don't really need the script. It's just becomes something that you're comfortable saying. So you do exactly the same thing with disputant or party number 2. If there are more than 2 disputants or parties, then you would follow that through. So it could be 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, it could be, any number of people in dispute. And depending on how many there are, then depending on, how many you need to contact. And again, what you're trying to do is gather from those individuals their side of the story. So again, we go back to the role. So we've got to be impartial, the ability to see and understand all sides of the story. So what we're trying to do here is actually gather the information about what this dispute is about. As a mediator, I might take some time out just to think this through. So just to think through exactly how I'm going to work on this dispute. So am I going to use 2 mediators? If it's face-to-face, then sometimes that can be preferable, because if we're building agreements, we might be using a flip chart. And if we're using a flip chart, then we've got our backs to the disputants and we can't see their faces. So we might look to have 2 of us because maybe the other person can pick up on something. Okay, so we'd be thinking about how we're going to do this. So what we might need to think about is, if it's possible, at the moment it isn't possible, but that may well change in the future, whether it may be preferable to do face-to-face meetings or whether it's going to be virtual meetings that we're going to consider. Again, we're going to do very similar to the first box on that model. We're going to explore the issues again individually. It might be a little while since we've heard from them, but we're going to explore the issues individually, and then we're going to decide whether or not we're going to get everybody together. Ideally, and I have to say that would be my preference, and the majority, or there are a couple of cases where I didn't do face-to-face and got everybody together. We were working between rooms. But looking to explore the issues and then getting people together to get them to understand, what the issues are and how people have reacted and feeling and things like that. But we'd have some very careful guidelines around the face-to-face meetings where we get everybody together. So we'd be sort of giving them some guidance on behaviour. And again, we'd still be checking to make sure that they are okay to undertake mediation throughout this process. One of the things we're looking to do is get the agreement, and as we know, this comes from those in dispute. And so we would look to record some sort of agreement that would be sent through to those people in dispute. And we'd be sending them very rapidly after this had concluded the agreement. And it can literally be something as simple as, I want this person to greet me, so good afternoon, good morning, etc., and only speak to me on a professional basis whilst we're in the working environment, and we maintain a professional approach to our work. Once we've got the agreement and everybody is on board with that, then we look to close the session. Again, this needs to be very carefully managed, whether it be by Zoom or whether it be face-to-face. So we've got to be quite organised in how we do this as well. One thing I would say is that HR do have to trust you as a mediator, because generally speaking, you don't go back to HR with the content of the mediation or the agreements. So one of the things I'll ask the disputants at the end, as we're looking to close the session, is what feedback do you want to go to HR? And on many occasions, it's literally, can you just tell HR that this is resolved? And I will just literally email saying, this is resolved, Anne Hall. Okay, and that's all I send. So there is a huge element of trust, and there's a huge element of trust on all sides with regards to the role of the mediator. So We're at, or we just looked at one mediation model. And again, this would be one of the models we'd look to explore if we were undertaking the programme. Benefits of mediation. So the thing about this is that all parties need to agree to this process. They're not being forced to do it, they are agreeing to do it. So they're entering it in a voluntary manner. It can be a very speedy way to resolve conflict. I've done cases in a day, so I've literally got the information in the morning, and then the afternoon we've got everybody together and resolved it. It's a speedy way to resolve conflict, so we're not dragging this out for months and months, as some of our processes can be lengthy. It's very cost effective. Even if you've got in-house mediators, then obviously it's very cost effective. Even if you've got an external mediator coming in, again, to get that dispute resolved speedily and quickly can be very cost effective. I think the main thing about this is that parties or the disputants are actually allowed ownership of the resolution process. So they agree to the outcome they want in order to make them or enable them to move forward on this dispute. And the disputants or the parties take responsibility for the development and the implementation of the agreement. So it's up to them to then move forward. I think one of the things it does send out a strong message if you do have either internal or external use of mediation, that it sends out a very strong message about the organisation in terms of dealing with conflict. And it does potentially reduce the risk of losing employees. If these things don't get resolved and people are, feeling quite wretched at work, the chances are, that they're not going to stay with the organisation. They're maybe going to look to move. Now, ideally, we don't want to lose some of our best employees or any of our employees in most cases. So it sends out a very strong message about the organisation and where the thinking is in terms of looking at conflict. So we've reached the end of our session. I'm open to take any questions at this time, if anybody's got any. Amanda, do we have any questions at the moment?
We do.
Okay.
I've got one question. Can a disputant ask for mediation and take out a grievance at the same time?
Okay, very simple answer to that is no. So ideally, what you'd look for is mediation to run first. And if that wasn't successful, I've not ever had a case that wasn't successful, but that would then go back to HR, and HR would be then looking to see whether the individual is looking to take out a grievance against the other people in this conflict. So no is the answer to that. Okay.
Okay. Would you recommend an internal, or external mediator?
Okay, there's benefits to both actually. So I've been an internal and an external. The good thing about internal mediators is they understand the organisation. So they know the culture of the organisation, they know how the organisation works, and they know some of the challenges that the organisation face. So there's benefits to being an internal mediator. In the true sense of the word, as an external mediator, you are totally independent. The chances are you're never going to come across these people because you don't work in that organisation. So I think there's benefits to having internal mediators, and also you can call on them quite quickly. The challenge, I've got one organisation that I'm actually doing some work with at the moment, and what's happened is, as it's evolved, some of the managers are just looking to use mediators. And so HR have really got some concerns about this. So instead of managers tackling the issues within the staff team, what they're doing is quite quickly pushing it up to the mediators. And so that's not the purpose of mediation. Mediation should be, used, but in a very considered approach. I think it's fair to say, not as an easy option for managers because they don't want to undertake that potential sort of conflict conversation. So benefits to and for both cases actually. So yes to both, I think is fair to say.
Okay, thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
We have one more question that's come in, although I think this is probably more for myself and my colleague Denise.
Okay.
Can PAI run this workshop in my country? I think the answer to that is yes, we probably can. If you want to leave your contact details, we can get back to you on that. We have actually had another question come in.
Okay.
Are there any special considerations in conducting a mediation virtually? Should cameras be on during the meeting to present a face-to-face approach?
So again, initially I would say yes to start with, because you need to build rapport. It's very difficult to build rapport, without seeing somebody, because you can't pick up facial expressions. All right. So over the phone and without microphones is okay, but I would really encourage people to have their microphones and their, well, they have to have the microphones on. There's not a choice there, because we can't talk to them really. But really, I would encourage them to try and have their cameras on, because you're trying to, initially as a mediator, you're trying to build rapport with them. And also, you can see their face, you can see their expressions when they're talking about some of the issues. You can't pick that up when the camera's off. So I would say, yes, put the camera on in order to sort of try and encourage rapport, and also to pick up some of those sort of non-verbal messages, because people give a lot away in terms of body language as well. And again, that's something we cover on the actual mediation program, about body language as well. So picking those sorts of things up. Any other questions? We've got a couple of
yes,
minutes.
we have another one.
Okay.
As the mediator must be independent of the organisation, should the parties develop a solution that is contrary to an organisation policy? Can the mediator guide the parties to make another decision?
So the answer to that is, if you've read the... So generally speaking, mediation doesn't sit within trying to change policies. It's normally a conflict. So you can't change policies within the organisation. That's not the purpose of mediation. It's conflict between two or more individuals. So you cannot change policies. So if they're not happy with, I don't know, a particular policy, so they don't like let's think of it. Social media policy. So if they're not happy about that, then mediation is not really, that's not really appropriate for mediation, because the organisation has its set policies and procedures. Just because you don't like them doesn't mean to say that you can take that to mediation. So that wouldn't be appropriate. You're not looking to change policies and procedures. They are set by the organisation, and those are the policies and procedures that individuals and employees have to adhere to. So mediation would not be suitable for that, I think it's fair to say. Good question, though. Who is that question from? Do we know?
Yes, that question was from Danielle Doyle.
Oh, wonderful question, Danielle. Thanks for that. Excellent. We've got a couple of minutes. Is there any other questions that anybody wants to ask?
Now is the time to do it. Okay,
now is the time.
Yes, okay. We have another question coming from Raquel Hall. Trust is always a major issue when having internal mediators. What can an organisation do to make their employees feel more comfortable? Do they now seek an external mediator?
So you're right, actually. One of the things, because not only do I undertake mediation and negotiation, but I am an HR and leadership and management trainer. So I actually design and deliver those sorts of types of training. And so what I've been doing recently, or well, over the last few years actually, is ensuring that the elements of trust are in the leadership and management programs, because a lot of the problems we have between managers and their staff are around trust. So introducing sort of trust into your leadership and management programs is always a good thing, getting people to recognize that, we need to have trusting relationships, and it's also getting them to look at the culture within their department, and how, as a leader or a manager, you need to set that culture to make sure that it's, conducive to working. So we want a positive culture, not a negative culture to work in. So I think, learning and development can play a big part in looking at some of the programs and incorporating elements of trust and culture within those programs. What was the other part of that question?
What can an organisation do to make their employees feel more comfortable, and do they now seek an external mediator?
Well, I think you might, if it's that, it sounds like maybe something's gone, I don't know, I'm just assuming here that maybe something through the mediation has leaked out. The idea is that as a mediator, you have to adhere to the confidentiality clause. And again, this is something we cover in great detail, but the confidentiality is based in the sort of counselling model, which is, should you be telling me anything that's detrimental to the organisation or an individual within that organisation, then I have to break confidentiality. And so when we're first talking to our disputants or our parties, we talk very much about what confidentiality means. So if they tell me something that's illegal, for example, I can't really collude with that. I would have to break confidentiality, okay? Because again, that's not an ethical thing for me to collude with. So if they choose to tell me something, this is why we cover confidentiality pretty much as soon as we talk to a disputant. If they choose to tell me that, then I have no choice but to say, well, actually, if you remember, our definition of confidentiality is that if you tell me something that's detrimental, etc., then I have to break confidentiality. And so they tell me that knowing it. And so I would have no choice really, but to actually go back to HR and say, actually, you know, part of this mediation, I've been told that there's illegal goings on, and that's not something that, you know, as a mediator I can collude with. So I think, you know, we have to be very clear what our role as a mediator is. We have to make sure that if we are doing mediation and we're working within the organisation, that it stays within the organisation. So, you know, I don't talk to anybody and this is where being a mediator is quite a lonely thing. You have, you know, excessive information about a particular case, but you can't discuss it. You can't discuss it with anybody in HR because it's confidential. So if it's that it's leaked out, you need to maybe, you know, look to reminding people, doing some refreshers around mediation, or alternatively, as you said, possibly it may be a consideration that you do look to use an external consultant for this, mediator for this. So okay. I'm conscious of the time. It's
we've got one more question, Anne.
Okay.
This is from Miriam. Would mediation work where conflict is with the manager?
Potentially, yes. There's no reason why. It doesn't have to, you know, be peer-to-peer. It can be manager and subordinate. It can be that. I've done that where it's been the manager and a member of staff. In actual fact, they were going to take out a grievance, which, you know, as we know from that list that we were looking at, that's not really where we sort of ideally want to be going. And so mediation was used with both the manager and the member of staff to try and get that resolved. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Good use of mediation. Good question there. Thank you for that.
Okay, we have one more that we can just squeeze in, Anne. This is from Deborah. Are there times when one of the parties during mediation refused to make any form of amendment? If so, what does the mediator do next to bring closure?
So from what you're saying, that they won't give on anything, is that what you're saying? Well, it depends on the other parties really, as to whether or not they're in agreement or looking to build the agreement. So if they can't come to an agreement, then, you know, we have to consider what the next step is. So this is where the skill of the mediator comes in. So you're not going to try and you're not going to change the outcome. You're going to manage the process. So this is maybe where we get people to take a break. This is where we maybe, you know, check that they still want to get this resolved. So it's the skill of the mediator to make sure that they understand if this doesn't get resolved today, then what are the options in order for this to be resolved? So, you know, think very carefully, because this is a chance at this mediation meeting for this to be resolved. And if we can't come to an agreement, then it would go back to HR. And many people, you know, once they think, oh my goodness, you know, if we don't get it resolved here today, they may be willing to make some compromises. So, you know, this is where the skill of the mediator comes in, because if it doesn't get resolved and it's not an agreement that everybody signs up to, then the conflict's not going to be resolved, and therefore it will go back to HR. I haven't actually experienced that, actually. Most people, although they don't want to be with you, they are quite keen to sort of, you know, move on and get it resolved if at all possible. So that's a good question as well. Excellent. So, welcome back, Slava.
Thank you, Anne. I think you took all the questions quite well. And we are now on the last slide, just to tell a little bit more about other programs that PI runs. So our next workshop on negotiation and mediation skills is scheduled, as Anne mentioned, in August this year in our Central London training facilities. Now, if the current travel and social restrictions remain, we will be probably running this workshop as a virtual program, and you are all welcome to sign up for it. I'll post the link to our chat box now. And there are several other programs mentioned on that particular slide, which we deliver, well, hope to deliver later this year in London and also in Dubai, as you can see.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Slava. So can I say a really big thank you to PAI, obviously Slava, and also to Amanda for helping me with the technical aspects today. I hope you found it really interesting. I thought you gave me some really good questions, so well done on that. I have to say, many people have joined us from many different parts of the world, so it's been a real pleasure talking to you from what is actually a very cloudy London at the moment. I hope that you found this useful. If you have, then feel free to contact PAI in order to sort of identify your next step forward in terms of mediation. But a really big thank you for me, for you joining me this afternoon. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you in the future. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks again, Anne, and thank you everyone who joined the session today. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody. Take care.
Bye.